Bonjour.
Bonjour et bienvenue au théâtre CFNP Press. We have a lot of guests with us today. I'm going to introduce them quickly. Everyone has about a 2-minute opening statement, and then I'm going to ask that if you can direct your questions to specific people, that might help us move quickly through the number of journalists and speakers we have today. Directly to my right is the Right Honourable Paul Martin, and then Ovid Mercredi, former Chief of the AFN, Right Honourable Joe Clark, Chelsea Vowell, Mary Simon, and Stephen Caxley. We're going to start to the far right with Stephen Caxley. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stephen Caxley. I'm the former Premier for the Northwest Territories and also the former President of the Dene Nation. My wife is Marie Wilson, one of the 3 commissioners on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Some of us have a fear that, and a concern that after all the years of hard work made by the Commission, that it may be again a report whose findings may not be acted on, may be ignored when it is delivered next year. I have 3 adult children. They tell me that they are concerned, and there's times when their sense of hope diminishes when you look at the issues that are facing the first people of this country. They tell me that some of their friends do not consider themselves Canadians because they're ashamed of the way Canada has treated the first people of this country. I, like many others, have dedicated the better part of my life to improving the conditions of my people. But I've come to believe that our efforts, no matter how well intentioned, to improve the health, education, and welfare of our peoples, of Indigenous peoples, are destined to the same failures of the past unless we build a new partnership and restore the trust that has been eroded by the litany of historic wrongs. Put simply, through our efforts here, we want to begin a new dialogue amongst Canadians about our relationship with Aboriginal peoples. We want to forge a new partnership. To be partners in an idea that a better Canada is within reach. One based on equality, mutual respect, and understanding. To be partners in a belief that notwithstanding the deplorable iniquity that continues in this country, that with goodwill and trust, progress is still possible. To be partners in a commitment, one that honors Aboriginal treaties and rights and is dedicated to the reconciliation of a past that too often has been marred by misunderstanding, betrayal, and neglect. To be partners in a dream where Indigenous peoples share in the full citizenship and bounty of this magnificent country. Today, each of us signed a declaration that set out our commitment to a new partnership. We will actively seek out others, including legislatures, labor and civil society organizations, to add their signatures to ours and to start down a path that will rebuild trust, remedy a broken relationship, and lead to a new, stronger, fulfilling relationship, a partnership. Thank you. Mary Simon?
Thank you very much, Stephen. Good morning, everybody. Ulakut. Because the revitalization of Aboriginal languages lies at the core of repairing trust, I'd like to begin in my own language, Inuktitut. Inu hatigitsuta kanadami pinasohatahapsimalawata kavamanik akuniulapto Pijari Paliasimalata, Nunatao Pigishimayatini, Nunatao Tusimayunik, Talimaulumata, Tamanna, Kayushigia Holoktabun. This is what I said in Inuktitut. Inuit have a long record of working with governments on developing a modern-day relationship with Canada. The result is our land claims agreements, of which we have successfully negotiated all 5 of our agreements, which are constitutionally protected as treaties under the Canadian Constitution. What is needed now, and perhaps what most confounds us, is that these agreements need to be honored and implemented. At a national level, repairing trust can be fostered through processes like what you are seeing today. Rarely have Canadians seen what has emerged today with this declaration, that accomplished and prominent Canadians from diverse backgrounds and differing perspectives and outside a government-driven process have come together to declare a commitment to work together on solutions. We need to start talking to each other in ways we have not done before. Perhaps some of the most compelling words of the declaration are these: we cannot allow future goodwill to be smothered by the exhaustion of historic failure. Throughout my life, both personal and political, I have often confronted exclusion. At a time when this deeply troubled me, I chanced upon a small but powerful verse in a tiny book. I really don't know the author of this book, but it said this: they drew a circle and shut me out. I drew a larger circle and brought them in. I have lived by that, and that is why this initiative that I am involved in today is so important. So, repairing trust is about drawing a new circle. To draw Canadians from every walk of life and to move past habits of exclusion into the unlimited possibilities of unprecedented partnerships. To my own people, I say, this is a moment we have to seize. We need to work as hard as everyone else to put forth new ideas, accept new ways, and as the declaration that I signed just a short time ago states, we must embrace the notion of partnership fully and place it at the very heart of our endeavors. And lastly, I was at a Truth and Reconciliation Commission event in Edmonton in March. And like Stephen, I worry about how the report will be implemented and received. Truth-telling has been very difficult for our people, but reconciliation is probably even more difficult. And we have a big job ahead of us. So let us work together. Thank you. Chelsea?
Nancy, I'm also going to introduce myself in my language, which is Cree. Chelsea Val Mitsigasan, Matusakay Mitnitoksin, Kutemsusweo Mania. So I'm from Lexington, Alberta, and I'm a Métis woman. Unlike a lot of the people that you see here, I'm not a politician. I have no intentions of ever becoming one. I'm a teacher, and what I do every day is talk to youth and talk to people, talk to regular Canadians about the issues that face Indigenous peoples. And it's an exhausting job because we do a lot of repetition. There's a deep misunderstanding about the issues that we face, and a lot of knowledge that simply isn't held by the general Canadian public. And so when we have to continue to explain what the treaties are, I'm from Treaty 6 area, what the Peace and Friendship treaties are, when we have to keep talking about our collective history in an environment where people just don't know it, you often run out of steam. All you're dealing with is reacting with the tragedies of the day. And we need to move beyond reacting to those tragedies. We need to stop being reactive. We need to be progressive. We need to come together. And one of the things that I really see as a stumbling block here is that we have a poor relationship with each other. And I haven't seen an improvement in that relationship in my lifetime. I want to see an improvement in that relationship in my children's lifetime. And so I'm sitting here with people that I don't agree with. We have many disagreements, but we're here in mutual respect with one another. We can treat each other with trust, honesty, and respect, and have these conversations about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's going to be painful sometimes, and we are going to face a lot of criticism, and we're going to criticize each other. But to me, this declaration is a chance to clear your mind every day and remember that a relationship is an ongoing thing. You don't get just to sign something, walk away from it, and there's the relationship built. You have to be active. So for us, we smudge. Where I come from, we use sage and we use sweetgrass, and we smudge and we clear our minds and our hearts. And we come to tables with people that we have deep disagreements with sometimes, but we speak to each other respectfully. And I think that it's time for all Canadians to have that respectful conversation, because it's the only way we're going to change things. So I'm really grateful to be here, even in a process that I'm not sure, this is not about creating solutions. We don't have the solutions. Those solutions are going to come from all of us working together. And in Cree, we have different pronouns for us. We have Nianan, which means it's exclusive. It's just us. This is not Nianan. This is Kianao. This is all of us. And so I invite you to be a part of that conversation. Can I ask Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Chelsea. No one wants our first people to be treated as second-class Canadians. Starting fresh, no Canadian would design a system with that result. Yet in far too many cases, that is what we have. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission is inquiring into some of the reasons that happened and some of the harm that has been done. That honest examination of the past is essential. But the remaining challenge for a country that is proud of how we respect one another is to look forward to and to find ways to build a better system. I expect that too many Canadians simply don't know enough about the depressing situation of many First Nation citizens, nor enough about the extraordinary success and accomplishment of so many of them. The news we hear about Indigenous people is too often discouraging news. Some of the challenges seem impossible. One truth is that those challenges are not simple. The more important truth is that they can be addressed and resolved. Many of us in this new partnership have direct experience in building agreement on some of the most difficult issues between Indigenous and other Canadians. Ovid Mercredi and I, and others, did that in the unanimous agreements of the Charlottetown Constitutional Accords. Paul Martin et Phil Fontaine, ensemble, et avec tous les premiers ministres des provinces et territoires, ont atteint un consensus avec l'adoption de l'accord de Kelowna. Plusieurs dans notre partenariat peuvent prêter testament à d'innombrables cas de réel progrès sur les questions épineuses lorsque la décision est franche et juste, quand la confiance d'une envers l'autre est établie et quand tous sont prêts à travailler ensemble pour trouver un terrain d'accord. So the differences, deep though they sometimes are, can be resolved. This is a highly possible dream. It takes understanding and information and will, and we invite Canadians from across the country to join us to build and broaden this partnership for Canadians' future. Ovid?
Well, as you can see, I'm getting old, but I've been involved in trying to change this country for a long time, but also trying to change my society, my own people, for a long time. And I have seen some of the progress we made, but I've been very disappointed with the lack of respect that I see between our respective societies. I see this in part, that's something that we need to address together, the people themselves and their governments, working together with the Aboriginal people to deal with pressing issues like poverty in our communities. honoring the treaties that were made, recognizing the right of our people to govern their own society, their own people, putting an end to unilateral legislation from Parliament, all concrete issues that I think that can be dealt with in a respectful manner. 250 years ago, in July, in the Niagara region, about 26 nations came together, Indigenous nations from what we call the United States and Canada now, to meet with the British authorities a year after the Royal Proclamation of 1763. They came there to talk about the relationship issues they had with the emerging settlement of their territories. And they created an idea called the covenant chain, the Turo Wampum, the notion of coexistence, peaceful coexistence between people of distinct societies, working together to create a new place for each of them in North America. It's that vision that has been abandoned, and it's that vision that we need to bring forward. And in that context, I, for myself as one individual, I'm an advocate for my people first. And hopefully someday I'll be an advocate for Canada. Currently, I'm an advocate for my people.
Well, thank you, Ovid. First thing I'm going to say is, it's been a while since I've been in this room. And I've got to tell you, Ovid, if anybody told me the next time I'd come, I'd be here with Joe Clark, I would have been. More often than not, in the discussion period that follows, when I speak on Indigenous education, the questions from the audience include whatever happens to be in that day's headline. This from incarceration and suicide rates to the number of Aboriginal children on welfare. Then somewhere along the line, someone inevitably asks the question, aren't these problems intractable? And isn't the solution that they should all become just like us? Now, in the past, when this would happen, I try and keep my temper. However, one day, instead of responding, I asked the audience what they thought. It was then that something wonderful happened, something that since then has happened time and time again. First, the audience responded to the question by pointing to the historic consequences of racism in Canada and to the mind-boggling discrimination that is inherent in so much government policy. And then when I asked them what we should do about this, they responded by saying, we have to work together. Or as Stephen Cackley has said, we need a new partnership. Ce n'est pas juste ici dans ce forum où l'on parle de la nécessité d'un nouveau partenariat. De plus en plus, les Canadiens en arrivent à la même conclusion. Ils sont sensibles aux inégalités qui touchent les peuples autochtones et reconnaissent les atteintes à leurs droits fondamentaux. Nous reconnaissons enfin que c'est la population la plus jeune et en plus grande croissance au Canada. Et nous voulons pouvoir miser sur cette population pour contribuer au succès de notre pays dans les années à venir. Tout simplement, il est temps de partager ce futur. C'est notre futur. The Indigenous people of Canada don't need to be told what to do. What they need is that their rights be respected. What they want is a partnership with the rest of Canada that will enable their children and their grandchildren after them to succeed. The best expression of this that I ever heard came from an Indigenous leader who, after calling for an education system that reflected his people's culture and that was equitably funded, was asked why it was so important that they controlled that education system. And his response was short, and it was very much to the point. He said, because we love our children as much as you love yours, and because we want our children to have the same opportunity that yours do. In my opinion, there couldn't be a better basis for the new partnership that we're talking about here today. And I am very proud to be a part of this declaration. Stephen?
Okay, we will do one question, one follow-up.
Thank you.
Stephen's gonna.
I have
Oh, I'm sorry.
closing statements. I'm a residential school survivor. I was in the residential school system for almost 8 years. Came out of there with incredible anger and a deep mistrust of government, of the church, and just about everything around me. Yet, listening to elders and taking direction from them time and time again, the message was respect one another, work together, listen to one another. Was impatient, angry, and many years of my political career perhaps was marked by that more than compassion and tolerance. I reached out to those with me today, having gone from the deep mistrust and anger I mentioned to forgiveness for everything that happened to me, and wanting to reconcile and have a good life for my children, try to be a good neighbor, try to be a good citizen of a country that I could be proud of. So I reached out, and this is the group that has come together today, and we've been working quietly for the last year and a half to come together. So we will begin tomorrow a job of rebuilding trust and repairing a broken relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in this country. Our members are all volunteers. They will attend speaking events, conferences, and lecture series across this country to promote our message, our vision, and to help offer to Canadians a new narrative, a compelling rationale, and opportunities for action with the goal of igniting and sustaining momentum towards reconciliation and partnership. We will launch an energetic education campaign across this country to raise awareness and understanding of Aboriginal history and the contribution of Indigenous people to that history and the potential it holds for the future. This campaign will feature multiple facets, including an active website and social media initiatives, a National Speakers Bureau, and media availability. We will expand our partnership to other organizations who share our vision to give voice to all those who are committed and willing to commit to building a new, genuine relationship with Indigenous Canadians. Finally, we will engage in an active outreach program with leaders of Aboriginal communities, business leaders, labor leaders, civil rights society leaders, and government, and ask them to sign our declaration and to ask others within their ambit to do the same. In doing so, we will strive to actively demonstrate to all Canadians a growing, broad-based desire for Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians to work together to build a stronger economy and value-based society. Thank you.
Okay. J'ai 9 journalistes sur ma liste maintenant. Si vous avez une question, s'il vous plaît, me signaler. I'm going to be strict about the one question, one follow-up. And as a reminder, please, if you have a question specifically for one person at the table, make that clear. We'll start with Jessica Hume, Sun News.
One area where tensions between First Nations and the government seems to be highlighted most is in natural resource projects. And so my question, which is for Mr. Martin and Mr. Clark, is do you believe that First Nations have an absolute veto over natural resource projects?
The Supreme Court has made its position very clear on that issue, and I think that the position that the Supreme Court has taken is very sound. I think there are a couple of misconceptions. First of all, First Nations are not against resource development. What they do insist on is that it be done in an environmentally sustainable way, and they also insist that in fact that the communities who are involved in that or who will be affected by that be consulted and have their say. And I think that this is nothing more than common sense, and it certainly is nothing more than any other Canadian would ask under the circumstances.
Just very quickly, as a very practical matter, the involvement and agreement of Aboriginal Canadians is going to be essential as part of the partnership to move forward on major resource projects in the country. And in fact, we have history, as on so many things, of finding agreement on these issues. There's history in the Northwest Territories. There's history in many pipeline agreements. There can be again. I don't think we should frame this in terms of having to go to last resorts or harsh resorts like vetoes. I think that there is a way open for us to do this together cooperatively, and we hope to be able to encourage more people to take that option.
And just as a follow-up, it looks like the government is not necessarily down with this cause, so I guess I'm curious as well, are you open to reaching out to opposition parties to work with you on this? Like, you mentioned you want to reach out to as many people as possible. Does this include opposition parties, by the way?
Of course, and governments. We want to draw as many people of goodwill as we can into this process, and we believe there are people of goodwill in opposition parties and in the government party.
At the present time, I happen to like opposition parties.
Madeleine Blais-Morin, Radio-Canada.
Justement, je vais continuer sur la question du gouvernement qui n'est pas à la table en ce moment. Pourquoi il n'est pas là? Est-ce que c'est parce qu'il n'y a pas eu d'effort depuis 1 an et demi pour essayer de l'inclure dans ce nouveau partenariat?
Il y a eu les conversations avec le gouvernement. Il y a eu les réunions, par exemple, entre M. Skakwi et le ministre M. Valcourt. En ce qui concerne le projet en général, nous avons pensé que c'était important aujourd'hui d'avoir un groupe des citoyens, en effet, qui sont intéressés par les questions. Aucune question. Il y aura les questions où les gouvernements et nous sommes d'accord. Il y aura des autres questions où nous ne sommes pas d'accord. Ça, c'est pour l'avenir. On veut faire face à ces questions when they arise. Mais pour le moment, nous sommes ici pour indiquer un consensus, un grand consensus, un partenariat qui peut inclure et, je crois, affecter le comportement et les attitudes gouvernementales.
J'aurais une autre question pour vous, messieurs Clark et Martin, puisque vous avez été d'anciens premiers ministres actifs sur la scène internationale. En ce moment, il y a des crises internationales. Notre premier ministre est au sommet de l'OTAN. Il vient d'être exclu d'une réunion organisée par M. Obama. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez en ce moment de cet aspect-là en particulier, de notre place dans le monde?
Écoutez bien, nous sommes ici pour discuter l'avenir vraiment de la coopération entre les peuples autochtones et les Canadiens. Il y a plusieurs d'autres questions que nous pouvions aborder, mais en ce qui me concerne, et je pense que la majorité de nos collègues, on veut se concentrer sur le sujet qui est devant nous.
Je suis d'accord.
Stephanie Levitz, Canadian Press.
I'm not really sure who's best to answer this question, but you talked a bit in your materials about whether this is a response to Idle No More, and I wonder if you could address that a little further, because one of the tensions that seems to exist right now in the Aboriginal communities is this tension between the grassroots and the leadership, and who really speaks for First Nations when it comes to this national dialogue. And here we have in front of us a panel of very, very distinguished Canadians who are not exactly grassroots, shall we say. So could you address that tension and speak to how you feel this deals with Idle No More?
I could address it in part. A couple of years ago, just before Christmas, you know, there was a lot of controversy around the Assembly of First Nations. Idle No More had come to the forefront. People were not happy. We were not exactly together. Some of our leaders were somewhat divided. Divisions were more apparent than unity. There were young people who were wanting for things to get better, and in my view, crying out for hope that something could be done. Chief Teresa Spence was in her fast, and there was hearings across the country with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Many of us were talking about the deep grievances we had for the years of incarceration, I guess, in the residential schools, but also seeing that we can't carry that pain and hurt and anger all our lives. We need to do better for our children. And so this, in part, is because of what we heard. My children coming home and asking me if I had something I could offer. That, is there something I could offer to help the elected leaders to do more, perhaps to do the right thing, to be more positive, to offer more hope? And is there anything we could do to bring down the anger and the despair and the divisions? This is about creating hope. It's about offering to show example of how we can get along in spite of our differences, and how to bring a very diverse group of people from across the country together to do a few good things together to begin that dialogue. And that's what this is about.
If I could just add to what Mr. Cackley is saying, to the question, when you said we're not exactly grassroots, I think that remark is not accurate, because I am very connected to my not only my home community but to the whole Arctic. So when you talk about, you know, issues like Idle No More or a movement like Idle No More, it's not just about what Idle No More represented. It's a culmination of all the different and distressing and harmful gaps in basic material well-being that has brought us here. And when Mr. Martin was talking about education, and then the question came about resource development, we don't often think about the two being so closely tied together. Resource development will only be meaningful to our people, not just because we're going to partner in the revenues of the resource, but by providing employment to our people. So education becomes a very critical aspect of how we view resource development in our communities. So when you talk about health and the suicide rate in the Arctic, it's not considered a crisis by the rest of Canada, even though the suicide rate is 10 times higher than the rest of the country, and we don't have mental health services. We can't get funding for proper mental health services that should be provided to our young people and to our people. And that's why we are here today. It's not about movements. It's not about organizations. It's about the people that we represent at the community level. These are the people that we are here for.
I guess just, go ahead.
Can I respond to? Like, I agree with the message of Idle No More, because their message was peaceful and challenging to the Canadian people In fact, what they were saying is, we need help, please come and join us. And so Idle No More is a movement that needs to be supported. And I hope some of the people that were part of that movement will see the benefit of this new group as part of that same cause, which is to say to the Canadian people, idle no more on these issues impacting Aboriginal people in Canada. That it's taken too long to address the issues like suicides, murdered and missing women, the poverty in our communities, the lack of housing, the lack of infrastructure for water and sewer and so on. Like, this should not be permitted by Canadians in a country as wealthy as Canada. And so that's how Idle No More awakened the Canadian people in a very positive, in a kind voice. There was no anger there. These were spontaneous gatherings of like-minded people that wanted change. And that's what we have here too, like-minded people. We don't all agree on all the issues like resource development or whatever, but we're here to say that we have to start somewhere, and that well, we have to work towards a dialogue and make sure that the foundation of that dialogue in relation to the future of Canada is also the respecting and implementing the Treaty on Aboriginal Rights of the First Nations people, the Métis and the Inuit. It's about Canada in many ways too, because the whole idea of the rule of law is the basis for Canadian democracy. And part of the constitutional rights we have are part of the rule of this country, the rule of law of this country. And the implementation of that is going to strengthen this country too. So it's not just a message to say to people, please come and help us. It's also a message that says, by helping us, you are in effect improving and perfecting your own country. That's the context that I'm involved with this group.
For Mr. Martin and Mr. Clark, then there was reference to this particular partnership helping elected leaders. So how do you see this partnership working with the current federal government? What role do you think it should be playing?
I think some conversations would be useful. As I said, there have already been some as this process was taking shape. Mr. Kakwe and Banavat Kool have met and spoken. We've tried to keep the minister aware of what we are doing. I would think that they would find it quite valuable to learn what we are learning, and I hope they will do that. There may be disagreements on particular policies. There undoubtedly are. We'll discuss them, if at all, some other times. But we believe that among the people whom we can influence and we hope involve constructively are members of the present government.
All of the people at this panel spend a fair amount of time talking to Canadians, whether you're talking to Canadians about education, whether you're talking to Canadians about healthcare, whether you're talking to them about resource development. And something has happened over the course of the last couple of years. I think that Canadians feel very strongly that the condition in which Indigenous Canadians find themselves is just simply not tolerable. And there is a huge desire out there for the kind of partnership that we are talking about up here. And this goes very deep, I think, into Canadian society. And so I am sure that no government is going to ignore that very strong feeling that I think, a very strong feeling, by the way, that is growing among Canadians, and especially among young Canadians, for the need really for a new deal.
Jorge Barrera, APTN.
It's interesting you use the term New Deal. Mr. Clark and Mr. Martin, especially Mr. Clark, Brian Mulroney spent a lot of time on constitutional battles, trying to bring Quebec into the fold. That has never happened for Indigenous issues. No Canadian government has ever said, this is going to be our main goal. This is going to leads the speech from the throne. Nobody has ever done that. Aboriginal issues, Indigenous issues are always like, 10th paragraph in. I'm just wondering why this is, and is the only way out of this is to have that type of constitutional ballot, to reopen it, to create a new third order of government, to redefine the relationship, instead of letting the courts pave the way. And the courts are never going to really define it. They just give parameters as to how you could interpret what consultation means and that sort of thing. Is that the only way forward, to actually reopen things and to redefine the relationship?
Well, just a slight correction, and Mr. Clark, first of all, was part of government that, that actually commissioned the Royal Commission.
After Oka.
His government. And
armed insurrection is the only way to do anything? I don't know.
The fact is that when I became Prime Minister, the religious ceremony for my becoming Prime Minister was a smudging ceremony. And we spent the full 18 months that I was there in office, in fact, working on the Kelowna Accord, which essentially was the embodiment of much of the kind of partnership that we're talking about. So I think the Canadian governments have done this kind of thing. What we're really saying here is that we want to make it stick. We want to make it not just be the part of any one government, but we want to make it very much part of the way governments in this country approach the issue from now on. Joe.
I agree entirely with Paul's recollection of history. I won't dwell on it, but both the government he led and governments of which I was part gave high priority to trying to make progress on these issues. And obviously the question of dealing with government is important. Our real challenge here is to address what all of us here believe is a genuine interest on the part of a broad group of Canadian citizens to do better on the issue of relations between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Canadians. One of the obstacles now is that too many people who are of goodwill just do not know what the possibilities are, or indeed what the facts are. And we hope that in our conversations we can increase that sense of public knowledge on the one hand, but also public engagement. We are a place to which people who want to change an unacceptable status quo can turn. We're not a government. That's one of our advantages. We have a capacity to people who want change on this issue. And we believe there are a large number of those people, and we hope that more and more of them will find this as a partnership of which they want to be a member.
I want to respond to, I agree with your perspective there, that we should not leave these issues to the courts to define and to resolve. These are matters of political will. Things to be discussed between the various bodies that need to discuss these issues to come to some solution that is satisfactory to all camps. And one of the outstanding issues is the recognition and the implementation of the treaties that were signed so many years ago. And the other one is finishing that project of constitutional renewal that was started by Pierre de Trudeau in 1982, a promise to the Aboriginal communities in this country that their treaty and Aboriginal rights would be identified and defined and included in the supreme law of this country. That process ended up in the Charlottetown Accord, which failed in the referendum, but nonetheless, the promise is outstanding. So part of the reconciliation that needs to happen clearly is to deal with the treaties and the Constitution. But not to stop there, because someone made reference to their grassroots people. They need help right now for basic things like better education, better health, better housing, and so on. This is a response that cannot be dealt with by one path only. There has to be a recognition that there is several roads that we can take to arrive at that point where we need to arrive, where no one in this big country with so much wealth is living in poverty and wondering where their next meal is coming from, or whether they even have a roof under their head to sleep in tonight. That shouldn't happen anywhere, especially here in Canada.
And just as a follow-up for Chelsea and Mr. Mercredi, you mentioned the Treaty of Niagara, and I think there was a wampum bill. And the whole thing about the wampum is and the whole two canoes metaphor. Are you saying that it's time to, leave the two canoes and to actually build a new vessel? Is that what where, you know, the two canoes are merged? Is that what you're sort of saying? That
No,
with this
I'm not
partnership?
saying leave the two canoes behind. I'm saying the First Nations people, like the Métis and the Inuit people, as nations of people, need to rise up to their potential to become strong again as a people. But the reality is, we live now with a country called Canada. So we have to be also careful in the sense that we're not involved in the process for segregation. That what we're looking at is some relationship that was started by the Treaty of Niagara. Because the Treaty of Niagara was not about two vessels going separate directions. It was two vessels on the same river. So what is that river we're talking about? That's the vision. Is that understanding what that river is, and the vessels can travel together. And and I don't want to introduce new issues here, but when it comes to, you know, the province of Quebec, that's the same vision, right? We share something in common, but we don't have to be the same in order to arrive or to take the same journey.
So I take my inspiration a lot from the grassroots. I think that there are amazing emerging leaders out there on shoestring budgets doing real work, and that needs to be supported. But what's happening is that there are pinprick discussions happening all over the country, really transformative discussions between Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples. But we need to build a bigger momentum. That's what I see this group as being able to do, is because you have a lot of really high-profile people who mainstream Canada is going to listen to, right? We're able to get a larger message out there, and I think that, like, my role here is to keep poking at them so they don't, you know, they don't forget that we're here, and I really feel that it's our communities that need to lead any sort of conversation too. So it's not, you know, we're in our canoe. we want them to stop jumping into it, but I don't think that needs to be abandoned. No.
Karina Roman, CBC Radio. I guess I wanted to ask Mr. Martin and Mr. Clark if the need for a group like this speaks to what some people see as a growing dysfunction in the relationship between Aboriginal people and the current government. I mean, if that was working, if there was progress being made, would this be necessary?
I think that this group is not only a very positive step forward. It is something that, if it had happened many, many years ago, we would be far further ahead than we are today. And I think that there will be a need for a group such as this under any circumstances, because one of the things that you're hearing from the table is, as Chelsea, as Ovid, as Mary and Steve, and Mary speak, Stephen, is there are misunderstandings out there. There are things which non-Indigenous Canadians don't fully understand, because in fact we do an incredibly lousy job of teaching history in this country. The whole question of the Indigenous worldview, as an example, is incredibly rich, but it's not understood by Canadians. And if the Indigenous worldview, where they're coming from, how they see the world holistically, if that was understood, I think that would have a fundamental effect on the debate. And I believe that under any circumstances, a group such as this is required to be able to say to Canadians, on the one hand, there is a far richer society here, there is a far deeper set of values, and there are things that all of us should understand that most of us don't. And to be truthful, I think that also to say to the First Nations, to the Métis Nation, and to Inuit, that in fact we're trying to understand, and we understand what has happened in the past, and let's talk about how we're going to make it better.
Just one quick addition to that. I think something like this has always been necessary, but there is an added need now, because we live in a world and in a country where more and more people are becoming disengaged from the political process. More and more people think nothing can be done on this and other issues. That's a factor of the times, that it exists in Canada, it exists in other countries. And we believe that something can be done. But it can only be done if people come together. And we believe that our very multi-partisan, non-partisan auspices provide us with some opportunity to draw in others who want to work toward that constructive change.
And I'm not that I need everyone to answer this, because I know Laura would kill me if that happened, but anyone who wants to grab on this one, is it just, I know it's non-partisan group, but is it just fortuitous coincidence, well planned, well timed, that this group is launching, this partnership is launching in a year leading up to an election? If you're talking about engaging Canadians and getting a mainstream message out and trying to convince people of a different future, how does that play into the fact that we're headed into an election year? Maybe Stephen wants to take that one.
Well, I could answer that. As I said, the seeds for this kind of vision happened at a time when people across country could see very divisive leadership amongst, for instance, the Assembly of First Nations. When a chief grew to desperation over the housing situation in their community and had to go on a hunger strike. When young people across the country said it was time to rise up, that they could not put up with the conditions of our people across this country anymore. That was when this group started to come together. And it has taken us this long. As I said, we're all working on our own, and to get to a point where we're ready to say we think we're as about a group as we can get at this point, and this is how long it's taken us to organize. And so it really has nothing to do with elections or the fact that it's any particular cycle or anything. This is as soon as we could get ready, we thought we should start. We're concerned about blockades and protests and many issues that keep coming up time and time again. And I grew up in the Northwest Territories, as I said, which is as militant as anybody. It's coming out of residential school. I had no time for Canadians, or the Canadian government, the government of the Northwest Territories for that matter, the church, the RCMP. It was elders who kept repeatedly saying, you have to respect one another, you have to work together. And one day the chief said, many of you young people, we want you to run for office for the Legislative Assembly of Northwest Territories. And many of us walked out and said, we're not going to do that. It's against our principles. I believe they are the enemy. Reason prevailed. The wisdom of the elders were self-evident. Many of those that, like myself, I became the head of that government that I despised and had no love for back then. We have a unique situation where many of us have become ministers and premiers in the Northwest Territories. We know that you can make arrangements with government, not always successful, but there's more success in working together than in just confrontation. That we need to meet, work together, have dialogue. We have made arrangements with companies like diamond mines and oil and gas companies where we have reached agreement to work together so that there's benefits. We agreed with the Inuit, who were historical enemies of our people. We overcame that difference in very short order. And although we failed a number of times, we kept at it until we agreed on a boundary. It was grassroots people It wasn't academics and lawyers and government people that arranged that. That was just Inuit, Dene, and Métis in Nunavut that came up with that boundary. So I've gone through a good part of my lifetime knowing what is possible. Other parts of the country may take a while. On the other hand, you look at the government of Alberta in March announced at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission event in Edmonton that they will join the government of Nunavut and the Northwest Territories to include in curriculum kindergarten to grade 12 the history of residential schools in this country and the culture and history of the First Nations people of Alberta in that curriculum. I mean, who would have thought that was possible even a year ago? But there it is. And there is momentum. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission has heard from thousands and thousands of people like myself. And we're ready to move on. Get rid of the anger, get rid of the pain and the suffering we've done and say, let's build a better place, let's build a better country. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission will be done in a year, and we want to make sure that dialogue and that work continues. And we are prepared, along with many other partners, to make sure that dialogue continues. Because that's how we're going to make a better country. Thank you.
Okay, just keeping an eye on everyone's deadlines. We're an hour in. I have new people on the list for questions. We've got 10 left to go. The next person is Marie Vastel, Le Devoir.
Oui, bonjour. Peut-être pour garder ça court, M. Clark et M. Martin, je comprends que l'objectif du groupe d'aujourd'hui, c'est de sensibiliser la population, la société à la situation, mais je me demande qu'est-ce que ça donne ou qu'est-ce que vous espérez que ça donne si le décideur ou celui qui peut octroyer les changements à cette situation-là n'est pas réceptif à vos demandes ou aux doléances de programmation?
Nous espérons que la perspective des personnes qui sont peut-être pas intéressées aujourd'hui pour être changées, ce ne sera pas quelque chose qui sera fait demain, mais nous sommes aujourd'hui à la commencement du processus d'accueillir les Canadiens qui sont et rassembler les Canadiens qui sont intéressés par ces questions. Franchement, notre cible immédiate, ce n'est pas les gouvernements, c'est l'opinion publique, c'est les personnes qui, comme j'ai dit plus tôt aujourd'hui, sont intéressées, mais peut-être pensent qu'il n'y a aucun espoir de faire les changements. Nous pensons que nous pouvons faire les grands changements. Commençons, nous espérons, avec un partenariat qui peut devenir beaucoup plus grand que nous sommes aujourd'hui. Et puis, et qui peut inclure les membres des gouvernements, les fonctionnaires, des députés élus, et qui peut réaliser en temps les changements.
Je suis convaincu que le plus que les Canadiens vont comprendre la situation, ils vont demander qu'on trouve des solutions. Et ça arrive déjà, et de plus en plus. Notre but, c'est vraiment d'avoir cette discussion avec les Canadiens et entre Canadiens et Canadiennes sur vraiment les solutions que ça va prendre. Et on est convaincu que lorsque les Canadiens sont vraiment impliqués dans le débat, que tous les gouvernements vont accepter la nécessité d'agir.
Donc, juste pour revenir là-dessus, vous êtes convaincu qu'éventuellement, ce gouvernement-là va créer un nouveau partenariat?
Ça va être impossible. Ça va être impossible pour un gouvernement, et que ce soit à n'importe quel niveau, au niveau fédéral, les provinces, les municipalités. Lorsque les Canadiens insistent sur les changements fondamentaux, nous allons les voir.
Okay, Margot McDermott, CBC Television.
I'm just going to ask one question just for time purposes, but I'll throw it out to the group. I'll start with Mr. Cackley though. It seems that we've kind of reached almost a tipping point in Canada. Maybe we're kind of sliding down the other side with the breakdown of AFN, Idle No More, the Supreme Court Chilcoomte decision in the spring. What are you afraid will happen if you don't, if you're not successful? I mean, what is your fear of where we're headed in this country?
Well, there's many fears. My own personal one is that my children will be dealing with the same issues that I dealt with in my 25 years of service. That my grandchildren growing up today will be looking at the same issues, the same conditions. And that at some point or other, we have to say, it's enough. We need to do something different. There will always be anger, but there doesn't have to be that much anger. I think we can take steps to remove a little bit of the pain and the suffering and the anger that is present in our world and our country today. And I believe we can show Canadians that by reaching out to one another, understanding each other a little more, making the attitude to give each other the benefit of the doubt, that we can come up with solutions that will improve the lives of not only the Indigenous people, but also ordinary Canadians right across this country. I think Canadians are ready for a point where we say we want to do something. You know, this has gone long enough. We want to be more inclusive. We want to make sure that the original people of this country share, have security, have a good quality of life, and have their rights respected and recognized. Their history, their contribution is there, and every Canadian is aware of that. That's what I hope. We can always have, and we'll always have anger, people who say this is not good enough, it's not going to do anything. But we also will have people who follow the words of the elders that have spoken to me when I was 23 years old, 24 years old, who said respect one another, listen to one another. We have to live together. That Canada is a good country. Canada is full of good people. That's what they said. Way back in the day when I didn't have time for that kind of message. And yet through my lifetime, I've worked to recognize that, to embrace that, and to say this is a good country, it's a beautiful country. We have not done well together, we can do better, and that's what we're about to do.
Can I say? Go ahead, Mary, please. No, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's not about worrying about what's going to happen in the future. It's about seizing a moment in our history where we have had a very unusual process that we've never had in Canada, which was called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. People that were harmed were forgotten. And it was the first time in our history that they have been able to tell their story. And we don't want them, the majority of the people that have told their story about the harm and injustice that they experienced, we don't want them to be in a situation that it's all for naught that we did this. We want it to become something. And that something is improving the lives of our people. at the community level. I always bring it back down to the people at the community level, because when you talk about intergenerational trauma and the violence that we see in our communities now, it comes from that era where people were taken away from their homes and the parents were left without their children. And it's to rectify that and move beyond that, and to make the lives of our people better in material ways, and also better in the recognition that people like Ovid McLeod has talked about.
This is, for a lot of us, life or death. It really is, because when we talk about the conditions that Indigenous people face, a lot of stats get thrown out there, but these are human beings and they're dying, and in so many ways that can be avoided. And we've had so many inquiries and we have so many studies and information is out there, but the will hasn't been there to implement the recommendations. The will hasn't been there to honor the treaties. The will hasn't been there to have an actual discussion on a national level. If we fail, that gets pushed back. It still needs to happen. This is not something we can ever avoid. It's going to continue to bubble out, and one way or another, we're going to have these discussions. I'd like it to be done in a way where we come together peacefully, mutual respect. And I'm okay with the anger. I'm okay with all the people bringing the anger, as long as we can sit down and hash it out. That anger needs to be there. That anger is there. We have to acknowledge it, and it's legitimate. So I'm definitely not here to tell anybody out there that you have to change what you're doing. We're all going back to our jobs tomorrow and doing what we're doing. Nobody needs to change that. But every once in a while we do. Hopefully we'll come together and have that big discussion, and then go back and regroup personally for a while and come back and do it again. We're gonna keep trying. So if this doesn't work, that's not the end of it. We're still gonna keep trying.
One personal comment, as a Canadian optimist. I think that if something like this does not happen, the tensions and the conflict in the country generally will grow more serious. So I think this is a very necessary step, and it deserves all of us giving our best to make it work.
Just to pick up really on where the others have been and where Joe has just concluded, this is probably the most important moral issue we face as a country. We've just come through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the results of which have just horrified Canadians as to what they have heard. And if we as a country don't respond to what has come out of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, then Canadians are going to ask themselves, what about these values of fairness and understanding? What about these issues which you tell us we should teach our children? Are we going to totally ignore that? I don't believe the Canadians will stand for that. Second of all, we're dealing with probably the single most important economic issue we face as a country. This is the youngest, it is the fastest growing segment of our population. Are we essentially going to say to the youngest and fastest growing segment of our population that you're going to have, you're not going to have the same kind of health care that others do, that you're not going to have the same kind of education that others do? If that's the case, then this economy is going to be in an enormous amount of trouble. We talk about natural resources. First of all, the economy is a great deal more than natural resources, and it's going to require the most educated population we ever can. If this country of 34 million people is going to compete with 1.2 billion in China and 1.2 billion in India. But probably, in terms of natural resources, one of the most important debates that is taking place in the country is taking place in Northern Ontario. And two of the absolute key players in that debate, Mr. Jussi Yakaguchi and Bob Ray, are here, and they're part of this committee. And so I think, to be quite honest, we are not. This is not pie in the sky. This is not sort of, these are a lot of pretty words. I think that what you're dealing with here is a commission that, or a group of people who have come together, recognizing that there has to be action taken. And the players who can really speak to that kind of action are part of the group, either on this panel or back there or in another group.
I'm afraid I've been told that we are out of time. If you want a one-on-one, Sean Durkin is right over there, ready and waiting to take requests, I'm sure. Our speakers have to go, so thank you everyone for